I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I have to confess, this is probably my first adjournment debate, so I am gutted that the Honourable Member for Strangford isn't here to actually intervene. Because is it an adjournment debate if he hasn't intervened? Probably not. I wish that I could carry on with that jovial tone, but unfortunately, we all hate being let down. I think many of us have been let down quite a lot this week, quite frankly, but especially so when you're led to believe a problem is about to be fixed, only to have the rug pulled from beneath your feet. Thousands of users of Leagrave Station in my constituency felt a huge sigh of relief, and thousands more would-be users who now can't use the station currently felt hope that they were being told just before the election that we were successful in gaining access for all funding for Leagrave Station, vital for our needs as a community, but as a station, for lifts at Leagrave Station, only to have this cruelly snatched away from us when we found out there was indeed no money for this scheme, and there never was. To put it bluntly, we were lied to as a community. But people in Luton North don't give up, and we want to know what the reasoning was for the lack of progression via the Access for All route funding. Also, when and how can we work with the new government to make progress on securing lifts at Leagrave Station? Now, Leagrave Station is a major transport hub for our town. Nearly 1.5 million journeys are made to and from that station every year. 1.5 million. Now, many of those that were approved for Access for All funding, I don't begrudge them. I'm very pleased for them. I'd love to live in hope that before I'm entirely grey, that we see all stations in every community entirely accessible for all. But I do wonder why it is that many of those stations that were approved for funding actually have fewer journeys coming from them than perhaps Leagrave Station. I will give way.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady give way, and it's an important debate. She would have heard, if she's been following the Bill Committee of the Railways Bill going through at the moment, that at the current rate it will take more than 100 years for step-free access to go around the full estate. Does she agree with the opposition on this instance that that is too long?
Per occasion. I thank my friend for that intervention. And yes, he is right. That takes far too long. Not only will I be grey, but I will also be dead. So progress is far too slow for us. But
Apologies, I was merely commenting that the Honourable Lady might not be. Longevity is certainly increasing.
I mean, I have good genes, but I would have to have extraordinarily good genes for me to see that to fruition. But I think the Honourable gentleman makes a really good point. Progress is far too slow. And for many people, train journeys are just something completely out of their reach. And that is not the way that we should be. They're not the limit of our aspirations, quite frankly. Now, lots of... Yes, I will give way.
I'm so grateful for the member opposite for giving way in this very important debate. And this is an issue that I think affects constituencies across the country, including mine, with problems with the Weybridge station. Can I just draw to attention my new clause 69 to the Railways Bill, which sets out a requirement for an accessibility strategy that the government has to report on. I intervene on her now because I also hope to intervene on the Minister for his comments a bit later on regarding that.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention, and I would want to look at the details of an amendment along those lines. But in principle, absolutely, we do need to have a strategy. I think many people would understand that this is not something that we can click our fingers and it happens overnight. But we need to be travelling on this journey together, excuse the pun, because we cannot be saying that public transport is out of bounds if you are not able to walk up and down stairs. It's out of bounds if you're a parent with a pushchair. It's out of bounds if you have an unruly child like mine that doesn't necessarily do as they're told, and you are absolutely terrified of using those stairs. And in many cases, those staircases, as I will go on to talk about, are in utter disrepair and are in a shocking state. So, in Luton North, we can take advantage of our close links to the capital to travel to work, to see friends and families, or head to the airport on holiday. Some people do have holidays, not necessarily all of us, but many people use Luton Airport to go on holiday, for travel for work, to see friends and loved ones. We should be enabling everybody, not just those travelling from London on the Thameslink, but those travelling from Bedford and every station in between, to go to Luton Airport on the train. For anyone who cannot use stairs, wheelchair users, people with heavy luggage, prams or pushchairs, 2 main platforms cannot be accessed at all. And I have to say, it is a real sick joke that it is listed as semi-disabled access friendly, our station, when in fact, any train heading north from Leagrave stops at a platform that cannot be accessed step-free. So if you're coming back from London or heading to Bedford, you have no choice to use those stairs or to use a different station. I do not believe any station that is only accessible on some platforms can be called accessible in any description whatsoever. Now, I've been campaigning to get lifts at Leagrave since I was first elected in 2019, since I was heavily pregnant with my daughter. And when she was born, like every other parent that uses Leagrave Station, I tackled those steep steps with a pram. Now, there was always somebody there willing to help, a member of the public, because that's just how Luton is. But we shouldn't have to rely on the kindness of strangers to ensure that we can get our children up and down those stairs safely. And then, as I've described, I've nervously held her hand while she was a toddler up and down those really dangerous stairs. And I see parents do this every day, battling with those unsafe stairs. And to the extent that I took the former rail minister to see Leagrave Station for himself. And he was shocked to see the state of it, but I also took my child with me so that he could see how impossible it is to navigate safely if you have a pram, if you have a small child, or if you have any difficulty with accessibility whatsoever. Now, I thought we had made progress because there were moments of hope. But I have to say, I reflect every single constituent in Luton North who is incredibly frustrated with being so close to seeing lifts at Leagrave Station and to have that cruelly snatched away from us. Now, I understand there are financial pressures facing the government, but people in Luton North deserve an accessible railway. So I've got some questions for the Minister. Since 2019, as you heard, I've been pushing successive governments on this issue. I hosted the former Rail Minister, Hugh Merriman, and secured a Network Rail feasibility study into lifts that was carried out in 2023. This study was a significant investment from the Council and went into huge detail on the exact design needed to deliver lifts at the station. In May 2024, the Conservative government then announced that Leagrave had been approved for access for all funding. But now we discovered that the money never existed and the projects were never properly funded. So can the Minister tell me, Luton Council and my constituents, why the existence of this major feasibility study did not seem to have been factored in the final decision to not advance Leagrave Station in this stage of AFA funding? I understand also that the decision on whether to advance stations was made on the basis of the availability of third-party funding. Now, Leagrave serves a large community, but unlike more affluent areas, does not benefit from a single large business or wealthy potential sponsors in its vicinity. Discussions with third-party supporters are ongoing, but I would welcome further collaboration with the Minister himself and his department on how we can facilitate some of those negotiations. The Equality Act and the Public Sector Equality Duty both put duties on Network Rail and train companies to ensure people with disabilities are able to access the railway. The government is encouraging people with disabilities into work, but are making a major way of accessing employers inaccessible for people who want to get to work. How does this square with our Labour government's priority of ensuring that people who want to work can physically get into work in the same way as everyone else? Currently, anyone needing step-free access to Leagrave, if coming from the south, must call ahead to get a taxi booked from Luton Airport Parkway. What is 7 minutes on the train could become 45 minutes in Luton traffic. I kid you not, Minister. When you have to get in a car to drive from one end of Luton to another instead of using a train, it can take up to an hour in heavy traffic. Luton is famous for many, many things, many wonderful things, including our football team. Our traffic congestion is possibly one of the things I am least happy that we are famous for. Network Rail and Thameslink do their best to facilitate arrangements for disabled passengers, but I'm sure that the Minister will agree that this is not ideal in terms of cost for passengers as well as the length of time it takes to travel. But there are lots of positive reasons why Leagrave Station should be invested in. And the opportunities that this government is presenting to our town. We've got the Oxford-Cambridge growth arc, which we are part of. We've got Universal Studios in Bedford, which is going to be coming on. I will not be going on any of their roller coasters. I'd just be happy to get on an accessible train, to be honest. We've got Luton Airport expansion. We've got Goodman's taking over the Vauxhall site. All of these are positive markers for investment in our town. But local people have to feel the investment for themselves too. So can the Minister, also in his role as Minister for Aviation, tell me how he hopes to achieve Luton Airport's expansion goals for public transport use if the north of our town cannot access the airport step-free? And can the Minister tell us, if we had match funding tomorrow, when is the earliest date that we could get spades in the ground? And to conclude, I'm not giving up on campaigning for lifts at Leagrave Station. I will continue banging on about this every time I visit that station, and it is not as good as the people of Luton North deserve. And I know the Minister will understand that I must continue to push for my constituents to get the step-free access they deserve. I am nothing but persistent. It is welcome that the government is putting money into communities like ours in Luton North. Between Pride in Place funding, a fairer council settlement, big projects like the airport and Universal, Luton is getting the love that we have not had for a very long time. But that is why it is so important that we follow through on projects like Lifts for Leagrave to show residents in areas like mine that towns like Luton deserve the investment in our transport and infrastructure. I look forward to continuing to work with DFT over the next few years to ensure we get the step-free access that my constituents deserve.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Minister Keir Mather.
Thank you and good evening, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is a privilege to respond to this important debate on the potential merits of step-free upgrades at Leagrave Railway Station. And I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Luton North, for securing it and for her tireless advocacy on behalf of her constituents on this very important matter. I know well just how deeply she cares about her community and how tirelessly she campaigns for improved public transport and safer, more accessible stations. Now, for many residents, Leagrave Station is not simply a station. It is a gateway to work, to education, to healthcare and to family life. But as my honourable friend has so clearly set out, for too many users, especially those with mobility challenges, parents with buggies, older passengers, or anyone travelling with heavy luggage, this gateway does not offer the accessibility that they expect. She is also right to say that the travelling experience must be safe, comfortable and inclusive for all, and that sits at the heart of this government's commitment to a more accessible and passenger-focused rail network. Across Britain, many stations were constructed long before modern equality and accessibility standards existed. And while around 56% of stations are now step-free, and around two-thirds of journeys take place between such stations, we recognise that this is just not enough. And I may be one of the younger members of Parliament, but I doubt even I will see the full realisation if we carry on at the rate that was expressed by the Honourable Member for Broadham and Fakenham. So there is a lot more hard work to do. And that is why we remain committed to improving accessibility through programmes such as Access for All, through our recently published Rail Accessibility Roadmap, and through long-term reform of the railways as we move toward the establishment of Great British Railways. Now, in May 2024, the previous government published a list of 50 stations selected for initial feasibility work as part of the Access for All programme. And as my honourable friend will be aware, this included a nomination for Leagrave Station. However, Those feasibility studies were announced without clarity on how projects would ultimately be funded and significantly raised stakeholder expectations in a way that was not fair. This government has taken a more rigorous and disciplined approach, ensuring that only affordable and deliverable commitments are taken forward. Our approach is seeking to ensure that the maximum number of access for all schemes can be delivered and the risk of schemes overrunning on cost or encountering unforeseen engineering challenges is greatly reduced. And with that wider national picture in mind, I would like to speak directly about Leagrave Station. I regret that it does not currently offer full step-free access to all platforms for wheelchair users, people with mobility needs, parents with pushchairs and those travelling with luggage. This remains a real challenge and a deeply frustrating reality. And I think my honourable friend was absolutely right to point to the human experience of dealing with this lack of accessibility, and it's something we saw at Selby Station when our lifts were out of order and only had a barrow crossing, and if there was no member of staff available to take people across it, you would have to get the train to Leeds to then come back towards Hull. It isn't a dignified way to travel, and it does need to change. We have also been clear, however, that commitments that we make must be affordable and they must represent value for money for passengers and taxpayers. And as my honourable friend knows, we have unfortunately decided that accessibility upgrades at Leagrave Station will not progress at this stage. In reaching that decision, we assessed nominations against a clear set of criteria. These included the number of passengers who would benefit, the need for a good geographical spread across Wales, Scotland and different parts of England, the extent to which schemes could build on existing technical developments and the availability of third-party funding. Stations that performed most strongly against these criteria are those which are now progressing to delivery or design. Now, as we know, Leagrave Station meets some of these criteria, including being a busy station and contributing to geographical balance. Indeed, she correctly highlights that Leagrave Station sees over 1 million users a year, and other stations in better connected areas and with fewer passengers were chosen to progress. However, I must make clear that footfall was only one of the criteria used in assessing Access for All nominations. In the case of Leagrave, there was little prior technical development work in place, and she is also right to identify that no third-party funding contribution was identified. And I would like to make clear to the House that the absence of that third-party funding was a key factor in the decision not to take the scheme forward at this time. Indeed, this was the case in relation to 22 other projects nationally, where no third-party funding contributions were identified, none of which, unfortunately, are progressing at this point. As we look ahead, local third-party funding contributions will remain an important consideration in future Access for All funding rounds, and this reflects both the limited public funding available to the Access for All programme and the substantial economic, social and accessibility benefits that these schemes deliver beyond the rail network itself. I'll gladly give way to the honourable member.
Dr. Ben Spencer.
I thank him for giving way. Just on the specific point of third-party funding, would you agree with me that when it comes to infrastructure projects such as airport expansion, noting Heathrow's proximity to my constituency, airport really should be a key target in terms of further funding to improve accessibility in our railways?
Well, the honourable member preempts me, as I'm to turn to how this particular issue to do with rail service intersects with the needs of the aviation sector, but he is of course right to point to the fact that surface access must play a really important role in the considerations around how we grow our aviation sector, both in a way that is sustainable but also meets those accessibility requirements of which he and my honourable friend spoke about so powerfully. So it's therefore reasonable that organisations and developments which benefit directly from improved step-free access, such as local authorities, major employers, developers and transport hubs, including Luton Airport, should also play a role in contributing to their delivery. Even partial local funding would significantly strengthen a future case for accessibility upgrades at Leagrave Station and help demonstrate shared local commitment to the scheme.
Would you give way?
I'd be glad to give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and for noting how important Luton Airport is to our wider community. Would he be open to facilitating greater collaboration between the department, Luton Airport and also our railways to ensure that we see greater surface travel through public transport and our railways?
Minister. Absolutely, and the government wants to see the benefits of the aviation sector, the economic potential it can bring, but also, as my honourable friend pointed to so powerfully as it pertains to rail, the human benefit of being able to be connected to loved ones and to be able to access new places. And these two things need to work in tandem, and I would be glad to engage in those conversations further. I would also just add that local partners are also encouraged to develop a local funding package, drawing on opportunities such as Section 106, developer contributions and city region sustainable transport settlements. And these can be used to match fund Access for All projects and are another way to bring forward accessibility projects. Further detail is set out on this matter in the written ministerial statement published on the 15th of January 2026. Now, I recognise that this decision will be disappointing to my honourable friend and her constituents. However, funding for future rounds of Access for All may be available as part of the next spending review, and this could provide an opportunity to fund accessibility upgrades at Leagrave Station. I would also like to highlight positive accessibility work already underway in the neighbouring constituency of Luton South and South Bedfordshire. At Luton Station, an Access for All project is currently under construction, and this will provide step-free access across the station and make a tangible difference for passengers. Luton Airport Parkway nearby also provides full step-free access to all platforms, less than a 20-minute drive away from Leagrave Station, but we have heard powerfully from my honourable friend about how traffic and dealing with Luton traffic is a key barrier for people being able to access those accessibility benefits. And I'll give way to her to add some further context.
I thank the Minister for giving way. If anybody can get from Leagrave, from the north of the town, to Luton Airport Parkway in 20 minutes, they must be travelling in some different vehicle that I have never travelled in, because it will take at least half an hour to 45 minutes in bad traffic. And with note on the Luton South, I know that my honourable friend from Luton South and South Bedfordshire is really pleased, and many of us in the town are pleased to see finally work taking place in Luton South. But that has been over 10 years in the making. Please, could the Minister tell me it won't be over 10 years until Leagrave sees the same?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is right, first of all, to enlighten me as to the reality of motoring your way through Luton to access certain areas, and she sets me a formidable challenge, which I don't take on, given the advice that she has given me. And likewise, I congratulate and respect the work of our honourable friend, the member for Luton South, in securing those improvements. But she is right to point to the fact that for people in her constituency who need to benefit from that accessibility at their doorstep, they need those improvements to come faster and further. And that's why through Great British Railways and the work we are progressing through the rail bill, but also through the next spending review and other ongoing work, we hope to make sure those accessibility improvements are available to people across the country. I can understand her impatience, and I thank her for it, because it keeps our feet to the fire. I'll give way very briefly to the member.
Ben Spencer.
I thank him for giving way. He knew this was coming. He just mentioned the Railways Bill. Would you care to comment on my new clause 69, which is to require the selling out of an accessible rail strategy, not only in terms of step-free access, but also in terms of lifts downtime? I feel a bit guilty in a sense, whereas one of the biggest problems we have in my constituency in Weybridge, we have lifts, but they're not functional quite a lot of the time. And so people travelling almost sort of play a Russian roulette as to whether the lifts are going to be available or not before the disruption that follows. Could you please comment on that sort of strategy as I'm proposing?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for his contribution. I appreciate and respect the sentiment that lies behind the new clause that he has proposed to the Railways Bill. What I would say to him is that through Clause 18 of the bill, we give Great British Railways a specific legal duty to promote the interests of passengers, particularly passengers with disabilities. We've got a tough new passenger watchdog to enforce consumer standards, but also to put accessibility at the heart of the railways that intersects with the long-term rail strategy that should provide him with the assurances that he needs that accessibility is at the heart of the future railway under GBR. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to make a little bit of progress. My honourable friend also shared her concerns about the current state of the footbridge at Leagrave Station, let me just reassure her briefly that Network Rail carefully monitors the conditions of its assets, and whenever the rail industry installs, replace or renews station infrastructure, the work must comply with current accessibility standards, and I'd be happy to talk with her further if she feels that those standards are not met. My honourable friend also notes that plans for Luton Airport expansion is likely to increase overall demand on local transport networks, including rail, and that point is very well made. Whilst at this stage there's limited evidence that we have to confirm the scale or certainty of the impact, indeed, as I've previously mentioned, a future round of Access for All may be funded as part of the next spending review, and this could provide an opportunity to fully or partially fund accessibility upgrades at Leagrave Station. So let me just close again by thanking and congratulating my honourable friend for securing this debate and for her tireless representation of her constituents' needs. I'm aware that the Rail Minister will meet my honourable friend on the 16th of March to explain the decisions made in relation to accessibility at Leagrave, and I look forward to continuing to work with her, with GTR and Network Rail to ensure that Leagrave Station is well placed to serve its community now and into the future.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Order, order. You got that one.